Hello, Jillian and Jonathan. So we're going to be talking again about the George W. Bush years, the first decade of the 21st century. But and it's a topic I know you and I have talked about before, but it is important. It's the economic developments of the period, and especially the events that led up to the Great Recession of 2008. Now, you'll remember, I'm sure we've discussed this, but this will be a refresher for you, that the Clinton administration, 1993 to 2001, and the George W. Bush administration, 2001 to 2009, both were dedicated to opening up the American dream of home ownership to more people. Having a house of your own, not only is a man's home is his castle, this idea of freedom and independence is tied to being a homeowner and in the American imagination, but it's also an extremely good investment for most people. Very seldom do housing prices really decline much, if at all. Most people, in most places, it's a safe investment to buy a home. And remember, if you're renting, you're not investing in anything. The landlord keeps all of your money. If you're buying a house and you take out a big loan, you pay off the loan with each payment, you're building equity. Eventually, you get that money back, all right, when you sell your interest in the house. So it's a good investment. It's better than renting for most people in most places if they plan to stay put any length of time. But it was clear to the Clinton and Bush administrations, some groups of Americans are disadvantaged in becoming homeowners. African Americans had a much lower home ownership rate than white Americans. Poor people across the board, poor Americans across the board, were not being able to buy homes. They didn't have the credit to buy homes. They didn't have the income, the length of credit history to qualify for loans to buy homes. So the Clinton administration first, and followed and deepened by the Bush administration, the second Bush administration, made it far easier for low-income Americans to get housing loans, to buy houses. But by easing up on the rules, it really made it easier for all Americans to borrow money. You can't it's politically difficult to say, oh, we're favoring just poor people to get easy home loans. You have to pretty much ease it up for everybody. So an awful lot of middle-class Americans could now get home loans with much less paperwork, much less difficulty. There were literally home loans you could apply for on the telephone by answering just a few questions and get a home loan. Imagine. Well, the result of this was that the late 90s and early 2000s first saw pre-owned homes that already existed, pre-existing homes. The sales of them began to go up and up and up. Not only just poor people buying them, but people buying second, third homes with these easy home loans. They didn't look at you carefully to make sure you really could pay back this loan you're taking out. So some people were too poor to really be a safe bet to buy these houses over the long run, and other more middle-class people might be buying a second home. Why? Because as more people are buying houses, houses don't come out of nowhere. The supply of houses grows slowly, but if demand suddenly goes up for houses, then the pre-existing houses' price is going to go up, right? Supply and demand. Supply goes up slowly, demand goes up quickly, prices rise. So all over America, home prices began to go up and up and up, especially in the early 2000s. It really took off. There was a phenomenon known as flipping houses. I used one of these easy-to-get housing loans to buy a second house, not my first family home. I'm staying put there, but I buy a second or even a third house. I might fix it up a little so it'd sell for a higher price. Some people do that. But other people didn't literally touch the houses. They might not even see the house. They buy it, they hold it 6 months, and then they sell it to reap the profit from the speculation of the price going up and up. If I buy the house for $250,000 and I can sell it 6 months later for $300,000, and there were markets in America, Las Vegas, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, where you could do that. $50,000 profit on a $250,000 investment. That's what? 20% profit in 6 months? That's insane. You're going to do that if you can, right? And all over America, people were flipping houses. So it wasn't necessarily the poor people that screwed all this up. It was a lot of times well-off people, because the prices are going up and up and up and up. Now, when you get a mortgage to buy a house, you're putting up the house as collateral. If I don't make the payments on the mortgage, the bank can take the house, sell it, and get its money back. I might get a little money if I've paid a certain amount of the mortgage off already, but probably I'm not. So I don't want to fail to pay my mortgage back under normal circumstances. And that's why they're considered safe investments. People really, really will do what they can to pay off their mortgage. They don't want to lose their home, right? That's normal. Well, since this is a safe investment, and there are all these housing loans being made out there, some really smart guys on Wall Street, and there's a movie about them called The Smartest Guys in the Room, came up with an idea. What if our financial institution were to buy, thousands and thousands of these home loans? Banks can sell them. You might make your loan with XYZ Bank, but they can sell it to ABC Bank. Now you make your payments to ABC Bank. Happens all the time. What if we buy up thousands of them, pool them together, and then the interest income for those thousands of home loans, that pool of interest income, we can sell what were called derivatives, essentially a slice of the interest income, a slice of the mortgage. You pool thousands and you sell to tens of thousands of people these little fragments of this pool of mortgages. Why would they want to do that? Because they can draw income off of the interest. Some little portion of the interest on all those pooled loans goes in their pocket every quarter. Or they can hold them in hopes that they'll be worth more in the future and sell them as an investment like you would stocks. These things were called derivatives. They were investments that were thought to be fairly safe because mortgages were believed to be safe, that people could invest in. Unfortunately, the housing bubble, you remember what a bubble is? That's when people are speculating and artificially driving prices up. These people are not first-time homeowners looking for a place to put down roots. A lot of them are buying second, third, fourth, even fifth houses purely for investment. All money, no home at all. And the price keeps going up and up, and they're selling and prices going up, and everything looks great. Then in the year 2007, things began to slow down in the housing market. I'm not really sure. I don't know if some particular thing happened to slow things down, but suddenly the price of houses wasn't ticking up quite so much. And in some markets, the price of houses started to stall and drop a little. Now, you know what happens when there's a bubble. The people buying those things are doing it strictly to make money off of increased price. If they see it start to go down just a little bit, they'll want to get rid of it before it drops more. So they want to sell. And that means the price, they'll take whatever price they can get to sell quickly. But the result can be, in a bubble, a cascading downward spiral very fast, very fast. In days, you can lose years worth of gains in a bubble when the bubble bursts. That is exactly what happened in late 2007 to the housing bubble. In many places, prices stalled going up, stopped, and then began to slide down. And all those speculators who'd been buying houses not to live in, but to make money on, began selling off their houses. And the prices began to tumble even more. And at a certain point, People who had big mortgages on houses realized the house they paid $500,000 for could not be sold for $400,000 today. And the amount they've already paid off, the equity they built up in the house, is less than $100,000. The smart thing to do is to just walk away. Stop making payments. Let the bank have the darn house. I've already lost $60,000. Do I want to lose $250,000? So just walking away. This was called going underwater, when you realized I couldn't sell this house to make back the money I've invested in it. Might be smarter just to blow it off. Literally just abandon the darn thing, not make any more payments. Eventually it goes to the bank and then let them have the turkey. And that was the collapse of the housing bubble. That was really bad, but there was worse. A lot of banking institutions invest. Remember, they have investments of their own. And there were banking institutions all over America who invested in these derivatives as safe investments. But if suddenly the price of these houses is plummeting and people aren't making their mortgage payments, your safe investment has become a turkey. It's not making any money at all. So it's now plummeting down. And first big bank to fail was actually a bank in Iceland. But the world banking industry is all interlinked together. And so when the Icelandic bank fell, a week later, Shearson Lehman Brothers in New York City, one of the big Wall Street investment houses, went belly up. And suddenly there was a fear that every big bank in America and the world could fail. And that, you'll remember, is what began the Great Depression. So President Bush at the time, George W. Bush, and the leaders of Congress, believing there was a very real risk of the major banks in America going bankrupt. And just imagine the effect on the economy if the federal government can possibly pay off the FDIC deposits on all that. There's not that much money in there. It's for one or two banks failing a month that they have that money built up, not giant banks, a dozen of them failing in a month. People are going to lose their investments. They're going to lose their life savings. Worse maybe than that, companies won't be able to borrow money to keep doing their day-to-day business. Just imagine the effect of that. It could be another Great Depression. So Congress approved trillions of dollars for what became known as a bailout of the big banks. They literally poured this government money into the banks to keep them solvent. Now, this may very well have been necessary to stave off a Great Depression. I think it was a good idea. But think about the optics of this to the American people. Bankers on Wall Street are the very definition of fat cats, right? I muddle along here in my little lower middle class 60-year-old ranch-style house in the suburbs of Fort Worth, working 3 jobs. And you get these multimillionaire bankers in New York City whose jobs are protected because they get trillions of dollars of taxpayer money. Bailout of these banks that were said to be too big to fail. We can't let them fail because they're too big. The collapse of the giant would destroy us all. So we've got to prop him up. So people, average Americans, tax money is going not to serve them in any direct way at all, but to go to save banks that, on Wall Street, that rich people have investments in. The politics of that was really bad. Now, it might have economically been wise. Personally, I think it probably was, but it feels bad, doesn't it? To think that trillions go to the rich while the average middle-class guy is the dupe who has to pay it out. Well, once, though, this shook the whole market, and it became much harder to get loans. The Dodd-Frank Federal Loan Act made it much harder to get loans, and the banks suddenly clamped down hard. You had to be a very good credit risk to get a decent loan. suddenly people couldn't live their lives as they had been. And industries started thinking, man, we're going to have to shut down this operation. We can't afford to borrow that much money. And so you had layoffs, unemployment began to climb. It reached 12% in 2008. And this is the Great Recession of 2008. The recession technically ends when the economy starts growing again. Unfortunately, and that happened in about a year and a quarter, the economy began growing again. So technically, the Great Recession lasted until early 2009. But in reality, the growth was very slow. And the unemployment rate stayed very high for quite a long time. And many people who had jobs didn't get raises for years. So if you ask your parents about the Great Recession, I don't think they'll think of it as something that was over in a year and 3 months. They're going to think it probably was something that lasted multiple years. And that's the reality of it. The economy was not healthy at all for several years. And even then, wage growth was slow. We still were over 6% unemployment in 2015, which is historically higher than typical for America. So the Great Recession would shake us well into the 2010s. All right. Thanks, guys.